We're live.
Thank you, Mrs. DeGraw. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for coming today. We'll go ahead and call our meeting to order, and I will lead us in the pledge.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The floor would be open for a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. The floor will be open for a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes from our previous meetings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Mr. Williams, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will, as I'm pulling up here on the screen, I know that your computers here in front of you on the table aren't working today, so I'll put that out as much as possible. A couple things just as superintendent, I've been able to attend the regional superintendent meeting earlier this month. And next week, I'll be going to Boise for the Idaho Superintendent Network put on by the state. And then upcoming thing for me, a PAW meeting is going to be scheduled for November 10th. So that's going to be something that we'll be working towards. The board, as you guys are well aware of, will either be attending the ISBA conference in November in Boise in person, or choosing to have that. The ISBA does have an option between in person and whether we'll be attending that. So that will be later on in November. I'll quickly go through this. Our transportation department did get the new bus. Came in. The maiden voyage for the new bus was with the field trip to go fly fishing. So Mr. Hall, who teaches the fly fishing class, was very glad that we got to christen the bus correctly and take it on a fly fishing trip. So maintenance grounds, custodial. Each year when our volleyball season, regular season is completed and our gym is available, we refinish the gym quickly before basketball season starts. The last several years, our maintenance department has done that themselves instead of hiring out, which really does save a lot of money. Our custodians are all being trained on how to do that. So Larry is doing a great job of training them to get ready for that. They have completed the refinish and now it is curing for its 10 days. But I just want to thank our custodians, our amazing women that they work really hard. They take pride in what they do, and we're lucky to have them. Food service hosted a regional supervisor meeting here yesterday, and they're doing a great job of getting food in a very tough time. As they met at that supervisor meeting, not only are they expecting increases in costs, but regional distribution centers are not providing the food. Sometimes our food doesn't show up the way that it needs to. And so just like to thank everybody for their patience as they have to adjust menus on the fly, doing the very, very best they can. Just want to say thank you to Lisa for that. For our schools, last Friday was our first blended day, and I just wanted to report to the board that I had overwhelming amount of people, teachers specifically, as I went through. We had about 30 to 40% of the students who came to school in person. For those of that need to remember that a blended day is something new that we're trying this year. And the purpose of the blended day started because we are no longer having a mentoring class period during the day of the school. So last year we had a half an hour mentoring day every single day. We felt like that time was not being utilized by a majority of the students, and it was wasted time. And so we decided to take that half hour and it fit almost perfectly and identically to the 4 different days per trimester on each Friday. And so as I walked through the halls, we had kids here at school. We had smaller groups that were working with kids. I had teachers, as I walked through the different halls, different places, say, thank you so much. We have never been able to help kids like this. This was a teacher in the middle school that did not have the mentoring time last year. She said, I wasn't able to help kids as much as I was able to help kids this year. One of the other teachers said, this is so much more effective than the half an hour of mentoring that we tried last year. So those were some from the teachers. We recognized from this first blended day that it wasn't perfect. There's communication things that we can continue to work on. And even letting teachers and parents understand this is the purpose of it. Sometimes our teachers are still not understanding how they can take advantage of this. We want this to grow into something that really does help kids that need it, but also gives parents a choice to be able to either send their kid to school. So even if your kid doesn't get invited, they can still come to school. Some of the examples that we used with this have been if you have missed tests or if you want to work on a project. I'm in Mr. Bird's welding class and I want to go out and I want to work for 4 hours straight on a welding project because I can't do that every single day. These blended days are perfect for that situation. So I've had a lot of positive feedback. I know I've got other things to cover here, but if there's anybody, I'm sure you've heard different comments on blended days because I've had some people say, I didn't want to send my kid, but I felt like I should have afterwards. And so I don't know, Andrew, did you have?
I do have a question. Do you feel like 30 to 40% is really the only amount that needed help? Don't you think? Do you think that many kids don't need help?
So here's the
With
thing.
something.
Here's the thing is everybody could probably use with something. So if it's on a day where everybody's there, we lose the ability to actually help the kids that need it. That's what it comes down to. But if you are a parent that says, I don't want my kid to ever miss school, you can send them to school and we will have them work on things during the day.
But is it just things that they
Wha-
make up? or
No,
just
no. Why
busy
could,
work? Or what?
I don't think it'd be busy.
But like, didn't the kids at home have an assignment to do?
They had a
to
reading. They
get
had a
back?
reading assignment.
They had a reading
On
assignment.
the high
and
school
they had-
level. Elementary was given a packet of information that they had to go through. Some were more in-depth than others, but those that were in the classroom, some teachers utilized it to review information that they'd gone over the however many weeks, 6 weeks that they've been in school. So like your first graders had a good review of everything, which prepped those students for upcoming subtraction that they're starting to struggle with.
So it's one of the things I can see that you're saying, well, because the kids are getting punished to have to stay home because they're on task. If you wanted them to fine tune or like, it's not always new things. Like, of course, we always want to build on what we've learned, but part of it is also going back and reviewing what we've done.
So that was more what their work at home was.
Yeah,
a review.
it was-
Mhm. Well, I would expect that.
A review, but it's also potential for them to have an extended learning. This is a part where we've done this once,
Right.
like one time.
So these kids that stayed home, the teachers thought that they didn't need it to come to help or to.
The
help them
criteria
with
that we looked at initially was, did you have any missing assignments? Or did you have a D or an F in the class?
Okay.
And so you actually
So I
had
was
some,
wondering,
you
are
actually-
these kids A students that get to stay home?
no, that we had A students that were here
Okay.
because they had missing assignments. And so it's one of the things that in past years, we've allowed kids at the end of the trimester to have this 2-week grace period to kind of just sit on their hands and say, oh, I'm going to be able to just wait because the school district's nice and they'll just help me out. This is allowing us to do our due diligence to help kids with learning loss, to help kids who've fallen behind, who help kids that might have, for some reason, a tougher home life where they don't have a parent that can support them every single day. They can come on these Fridays, feel like get extra support from the teacher. This is a day where those kids that have struggled the whole time because they are in the shadow of the kids that are always easily doing it. They have a chance now to connect with their teachers on a level that is not going to happen when you have all 25 or 30 kids in a classroom.
I would like to see if, at the end of this experiment, that if we indeed need 4 days and.
Could it be 3 maybe? Could it be 2?
Yeah.
Fine.
Does it need to be 5?
I think it's beneficial to see that we're not waiting until the very end of the trimester to say, oh, you have all these missing assignments. Oh, you've fallen so far behind. There's no way you can get yourself out of this hole and you're going to end up with this grade at the end of the trimester. Whereas you're catching it partway through, they have a chance to fix things, to relearn something and do better as they go forward.
And I definitely recognize that it's not, like, we didn't package a perfect thing. This is something that as I talk with some of the teachers, they'll try some things differently. They might invite different kids. It shouldn't be the same kids every single time because it's not meant to be a punishment. I did have one parent ask me and say, I just feel like you're punishing my kid for inviting them to come to school. And so I don't want to do that. What we're trying to present here is this is something that we can do for your kids. I'm not going to excuse and say education is a punishment. It should never be a punishment to come to school. The whole purpose of this is not to say, you guys get a day off, you guys get to come. It's a different way to look at being an educated group of people. And education can look differently and comes to us differently. I do have two administrators here. I put them on the spot. Guys, think of one positive or one thing that you might want to improve on with the blended day, maybe however it is, and maybe some feedback that your teachers gave. But board members, did you have any other concerns from patrons or anything?
Well, on the elementary level, I had someone say that they had sent their student to school and it was beneficial because the student had missed a few days the prior week, so they were able to catch up. There were some reservations in sending their children to school because they didn't want it just to be a day of the kids just play on the computer the whole time. But it turned out to be better than what they had anticipated. And it was beneficial for both grade levels where their students were at. And so that was a good thing. And they had feedback from one of the teachers of the students, and the teacher was happy with what they were able to do during that day. So that was good. On the high school level, I heard that a student who doesn't normally like coming to school actually said they enjoyed coming to school that day because there weren't as many kids around. And so it was easier to talk about things with their teachers. So.
Yeah. Mr. Johnson, if you could speak loud, I know I'd be on the spot.
So I kind of similar, I was talking to some of the teachers over at the elementary school and they love being able to go and spend more one-on-one time with those kids that needed it. I know there were some students also that just missed a couple of days and so they were able to make up that work instead of just sending them packets home and saying, hey, finish this at home on your own. They were able to give them more input and more support.
Anything from the elementary level you might encourage your teachers to tweak?
I am going to go over with my teachers tomorrow is just get some more ideas on what to do because I think they were so used to before when we had all the COVID and we were shut down just doing packets.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to talk to them about what the high school is doing with the book and also just extended that learning and taking it a little bit further rather than just the packet. But
okay.
I'm looking over that tomorrow.
All right, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I think there's some things that are probably a little challenging to fit in an hour in the high school. So I think Mr. Hanson and Mr. Bird and a lot of people, if they've got a project that they're working on, if they can pump in about 3-4 hours on something, they can really do a good job on something and put together a really good project. But I think it recouped a lot of people and kind of got them almost above water where they're maybe struggling a little bit. I think probably one thing we'll try to improve, we had students check in each hour to their normal class. And we do that mostly for safety, just so we can say, okay, where's the student? If we have a fire, we didn't know where the kid is. I think creating a note is probably what we'll do moving forward. We'll still have that same process, but we'll try and create a note in a spreadsheet that'll show, okay, this is where this kid left and this is where the kid is now, and be tied on that so that we just safety wise can make sure we know where every kid is.
Go ahead.
So is it set up in the high school that they could go to each class, each hour that they would normally go to? And you would expect them to be, if they're there, you would expect them to be in that class, or would you expect them to be in an English class for 2 hours or maybe another class for more?
Yeah, I like that question because it addresses kind of where the kid is during the day and how much he needs the support and where. So you might have a kid that needs it in 3 subjects and those are listed on the spreadsheet we have and they've gotten a printout the day before that says, with 3 classes you need help in. But they're just checking in with the teacher each hour when the bell rings to say, okay, he is in attendance this hour. The teacher's going to send him over. So if he needs, like, say, for example, 3 hours of English with Mrs. Scott, then the student can go over and work with Mrs. Scott, but at least just check in and then return. And that's something they brought up that You know, I don't know, for attendance wise, that's up like the first time around and we work the best, but you're right, you might have kids that need a lot of support in English or math, which is what we found. English and math need quite a bit, so they might be there most of the day, but for now, we left it as just check in with that teacher, then you go right back to math. If you need a good 3-4 hours in math, or you need extra time in math, so the other thing we thought about is possibly, and there's a math specialist in Bonneville that maybe we could contact for a day and put him on a sub list, that he could come in and work small groups, because I think those 2 classes are the ones that get a lot of overload and kids that need it the most, because they're the core subject, but yeah, I like that question.
Great idea.
So definitely we're open to suggestions, as this is something that is growing and other thoughts and comments as as I've popped around, they had a potluck over at the elementary. I had to go over there and eat the soup, right?
Of course.
But some of the things that they had comments was possibly being able to have a, wait for that announcement. So we can look at ways to also have a different or better extension of opportunities for kids. That's something that we've got to start somewhere. We're starting right now mostly with a focus on the remediation, but we do have our eye on improving this as we go forward. So that's the first bullet there on the school section with blended day. Field trips, we had a Yellowstone field trip, a pumpkin patch, fly fishing when I talked about that. Just a heads up, the ever so popular Hamer Halloween Carnival, it's gonna be Friday, October 29th. Can always remember that from my kid days, and so I'd like to encourage people to get up to that. It's a fun one. Extracurricular, really busy. Volleyball's at districts right now. If they win today, I haven't heard first game yet. I just
Who were they playing?
so they were playing salmon right now. The winner goes to state, and so if we get an update, I'll answer that. Football game and cross country, or football and cross country senior night is tomorrow here at the football game. There will be no JV football game, as Salmon does not have a team. Junior high wrestling has started today. Girls basketball started their season. Their first game, 7th and 8th grade, both won in Teton on Tuesday. Cross country had some state qualifiers, and so from the district meet, Kaylee Dowling placed 5th overall, and Haley Belknap placed 10th. Hiram Spencer was 4th, and Daniel Spencer was 11th. So those 4 runners will represent West Jefferson at the state meet next weekend in Eagle over in Boise. And I don't have the picture on this one here, but we did have some placers in the soils and range competitions that we had. Tegan Hansen was 2nd place in the regional one for soils. Mac Rigby was 5th. Andrew Sharp was 1st in range evaluation, and I think this was the district level, and the West Jefferson team also placed 2nd. And then they did go to the state one. I believe they were 6th overall on that, so that was a pretty good showing for those young individuals. And last, for the extracurricular, our new scoreboards for the softball and baseball field have arrived. They're here. Mr. Soderquist is working on getting the things set up so we can get those in and have them on schedule to be ready to be used by next spring. So that's all I have, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I do not have an update on the volleyball. I don't know if that's good or bad. But we'll move forward, so.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mrs. DeGraw, do we have any public comment sheets?
We do, we have one. It was submitted online. If you're okay, I can read it for the board.
Yeah, I don't have capability, so.
It's from Emily Belknap. She said, we just had our first blended learning day of the 21-22 school year. I feel there are some consequences that have not been considered when instituting the blended learning days. First of all, it takes away the chance students have to learn from their failure or missing a deadline for their schoolwork. Students can learn from reflecting on failure, what needs to change for success next time. They can learn how they may need to change their use of resources like time, references, and mentors when working toward a goal of completion. Finally, a lesson that can be learned is how to meet and what it takes to meet a hard and fast deadline. When students move on to other enterprises in life, be it college or work environments, they will be better prepared for the responsibility to learn, contribute, and provide for themselves if they are given the chance now to work toward a deadline with consequences of failure. Second, as a parent, I am ultimately held responsible for teaching my children how to interact in society and to be sure they have the skills necessary to care for themselves in the future.
In this effort, I have the opportunity to delegate some of that responsibility to others. In this case, I have sent 2 of my children to the local public school to be taught. This delegation was done with the assumption that the school's primary work of educating my children would happen when they were physically at the public school building. To continue that assumption to include that when my children are home, their education is my responsibility. I've been told with blended learning days, this is not the case, and the schools still, similar to spring 2020, have hold of the students' time and have expectations that will have consequences on their future time at home. Let's be clear in understanding that the kids not invited to attend the physical building on blended day are the ones meeting the deadlines and doing well with their work. Why would the school then require more from them? When my kids are home, I do not want the school telling us what we will and will not do for education that day. If you need them for attendance/funding, have a school day and teach them. Lastly, this calendar looks very close to a 4-day school week because of the blended days. Fridays, that may not be required attendance. The patrons said they did not want a 4-day school calendar. I do not like how it breaks up the consistency of the schedule. The learning is broken up and it could cause some difficulty, especially for students who struggle to get and keep a routine for learning. The old way was not broken, so why did you change it? I cannot see the benefit to my students, to special needs students, or to employers who are not going to receive employees who understand how to work to a deadline for completion of work.
Thank you, Mrs. DeGraw.
I just got an update.
I did too.
Okay.
So, sorry, if we can go back to the,
Yes, go ahead.
so West Jefferson has won the first and second sets, and they are in a commanding lead in the third, so. There's so 19-7, so,
Super.
and so we will be, looks like our girls will be going to state next week in North Idaho by Corn Kelly, so.
Good for them.
All right, okay, good news.
All right. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The floor will be open for a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Financial audit, Mr. Bond. Welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Nice to meet Mr. Davis as I got here a little bit early and got to meet him, find out what's going on at the high school. It's nice. For those that don't remember, my name's Scott Bond. I'm with Rudd & Company. We've completed the financial audit of the district for the year ended June 30th, 2021. I'd like to take just a few moments this afternoon and go over some of the highlights of that audit. We did have an opportunity a week or so ago to meet with the superintendent and the business manager and staff to go over in a little bit more detail some of the numbers and respond to questions, concerns, and comments. I think it was a very productive meeting. So I try not to take more than 15 or 20 minutes, but if you have questions, please just interrupt me and we'll go over any specifics that you might want to discuss. I'd like to start by going over our auditor's opinion. It's on pages 1 through 3 of this packet that I've given you, the larger packet. There's a letter also that we'll look at. It's in the very back. We'll talk about that at the end of my presentation. The auditor's opinion letter, again, is just like last year, we're issuing a clean opinion on the books of the district with the exception of the government-wide financial statements, which include the other post-employee benefits, which requires an actuarial evaluation to be completed prior to those being able to be audited. What that means, and I believe several years ago, the district did pay to have that done. That expires after 2 or 3 years, and so it needs to be renewed. But there's a cost to that. The cost benefit, I think, has been weighed by the district, and it was determined that the benefit just wasn't there to incur that cost currently. And so for that reason, the actuarial valuation is not available for audit, and so we have to qualify the opinion in that area only. So if you look at page 2, it will break out by opinion unit what I'm talking about here. So you can see the major funds as well as the aggregate remaining funding or information is all unmodified or a clean opinion. And then the qualification occurs on that first one, the government-wide activities. like to look at some of the numbers now. If you would turn with me to pages 16, 17, that's the balance sheet, and then we'll look at 19 and 20. 16 and 17 are facing pages. You can see that they are presented in the format that you're used to. The first 4 columns there are what we term major funds. Those are by definition defined by the state. The general fund, the child nutrition program, the debt service program or fund, and then the plant facility fund. All of those are required to be shown separately. The other several funds that the district has and operates we'll look at, but they're all combined into that 5th column, other governmental funds, and we'll look at the detail on that towards the end of the presentation. If you would turn with me to page 19, let's look at the inflows and outflows or revenues and expenditures. I really want to focus on the general fund more than anything. So if we look at that first column, the top third of that page shows the inflows, the revenues by source. You can see the majority of the revenues are coming from the state, 4.7 million approximately, 4.6 million approximately, of the 5.2 million that came in. One thing I will note is that due to the COVID issues that the district faced, there was a lot of additional federal dollars that came through the books in various programs. Some of those being reflected here in the general fund. You can see 186,000 of federal source revenue. But as we get into the child nutrition program, as we get into the special revenue funds towards the back, you'll see that there was a considerable amount of federal money that came in under the COVID relief fund, under the ESSER monies, ESSER 2 monies, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about what to expect from ESSER 3 in this current fiscal year and some things to watch for. So anyway, back to our first column on page 19. Revenue sources there at the top. In the middle, you'll see the expenditures. Those are by function. So you can see the breakout of those. And then at the bottom, the transfers in and out and the change experienced by the district in the fund balance for the current year. So the third row from the bottom, you can see the net change or net increase in the fund balance of 162,769. Began the year at 639, ended the year at 802. That 802 represents approximately 2 months worth of reserve, which I think is a good healthy goal to have as a district. We always like to see districts with 2 to 3 months, if possible, of reserve, just in case, especially as you go through uncertain years related to pandemics, related to state holdbacks, and other things that could happen. So any questions about the general fund before I leave there, specifically about that fund balance? Okay. Child nutrition program, we won't go through as much detail. Again, you can see the format, the inflows and outflows. Most of the districts that we audit experienced significant increases, not significant, but more than usual increases in their fund balances in the child nutrition program. The reason for that is most districts were able to take advantage of the seamless summer program, or the program which allowed for more meals to be provided to those who needed them and a higher reimbursement rate to be received by the districts for those meals that were served. They did away with, during the pandemic, the requirement for free and reduced applications. It was more a broad-based, those in need would be able to receive that service. So you can see that the fund balance at the bottom went from a beginning of the year of 38,000 to the end of the year of 139,000. Now, what that means is it provides your district some additional funds in that program. Those monies have to be spent on child nutrition for whatever their needs are, whether it be equipment needs, menu needs, staffing needs. Those are some things that your people would need to look at. Yes, please.
It's okay to have a fund balance in that.
The state monitors that. If it becomes too large, they will bring that up in their audits that they do with the district. I haven't heard any of the districts this year being penalized for having additional funds, and it was just because of the additional federal dollars that came in. What they do monitor is they want to ensure that meal prices continue to increase. Just because you have some additional funds doesn't mean you can lower your prices or keep them low. That doesn't make sense to me. I would think you could pass that savings on to the patrons, but there is a requirement that they keep their meal prices at a specific level, and they monitor that.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Just on a side note, we had one district that we audit in the state of Idaho who, because they received additional funding in their child nutrition program, they contacted the state and said, since we have this reserve, could we purchase a food truck? They were the first district in Idaho to actually purchase a food truck, and they used that to go to, as a concession, to go to ball games, to different schools that are off-site where they don't fix meals, and raise some money also, and the state approved that.
They did, they
Yes.
approved that.
They approved
Wow.
that. So that was a good use of federal dollars. Now, I'm glad they got permission first, because that would be a concern,
Yeah.
right? Okay. The debt service fund, again, this program or this fund is restricted for payment of outstanding debt. And as you're aware, this last year, the bond of the district was paid off. And so you can see that at the ending balance on page 19, the third column, ended the year with $11,000. And we discussed that, what would happen with that. As you bond again, that additional money will come into that fund and you'll use that to service the debt. If there were no additional debt service requirements, it could be transferred and used for plant facility needs. Just keep that in mind in the future. The plant facility fund, the first column on page 20, again, this is the inflows and outflows of the maintenance projects, bus related items, just the ongoing plant facility needs of the district. Began the year, I'm looking at the bottom three lines again, began the year at 256,000 with an increase of 99, ending the year at 356,000.
And, you know, and I'd just like to point out with that, as we look at the 356,000, we have to remember that this audit was conducted at the end of June. And
June 30th.
June 30th, and did not bring into all of the summer projects. We also have the reserve fund of $200,000 that we want to keep in there. And so as we looked at that, we were able to spend down the amount that we wanted to, I believe around 25,000. So wasn't it,
The
Mrs.
bus
DeGraw?
also hadn't come out yet, because we don't pay for the bus until we receive it. So we just paid for the bus on Monday.
Yes,
So that was $150,000. That's no longer in that
Yep.
account.
so it's right where we want it to be.
We had a good discussion about that during our closing meeting, and you're not alone in that most districts will budget for projects that they know need to be completed. And a lot of those projects will be conducted in July and August after the school year's over, or end of June. From an audit standpoint, those expenditures need to be incurred, meaning that an order's placed and delivered prior to the end of the year, or they have to fall into the next budget year. So we can't just pull everything that you wanted into the previous year unless significant activity has happened on those projects or in that budget year. So it's a good point that the superintendent brings up, is that some of those monies that were there at June 30th have been expended or really aren't available anymore. Same with any of the other funds that you look at here. We've had that discussion before about student activity funds, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But any questions about these programs here that we're looking at on 19 and 20? All right, if not, I'd like to just go over with you some of the footnotes. The footnotes in the financial statements are really a narrative about some of the numbers we just looked at. So they will provide some additional insight as to things we've already discussed. But if you could turn with me to page 31, I thought this was important. Footnote number 5 at the top of page 31 is a reflection of the debt requirements outstanding at the end of June 30th at the district. So you can see in that first column, and this is really what I wanted to focus on, But at the beginning of the year was the 190,000 remaining on your bond. That was paid off. And so there are currently no, as of June 30th, there was no bonds outstanding in the district. The other types of liabilities, compensated absences, we had a good discussion on that. The other two columns, the net pension liability and the OPEB liability, are state mandated liabilities. It's basically the district's share of the retirement and other benefits promised to teachers. So they have Percy, you're familiar with that. What that means is that that's the retirement vehicle used by the state to fund the retirement of the teachers. And so what they do is look at how big is your district, how much are you contributing to Percy, and we'll allocate you a share of that unfunded liability. And so that's what we're looking at here. There's really no control that you have over that, those liabilities, but we do have to report on them. The next one I'd like to look at with you is page 45. At the bottom of page 45, footnote 10, this is a required disclosure. We are required when we perform an audit to disclose if there are any funds that end the year in a deficit or in the red. There were none. And then any funds whose expenditures exceeded the amended or adopted budget that the district had. In this case, there were two small instances. I think it's very commendable that there were only two and that they were just these small amounts. But you can see that under the State Substance Abuse Fund and under the Title I program, there were some small budget overages, but nothing of significant concern. The next thing I wanted to look at with you on page 47. Page 47, footnote 12 at the bottom. This is by definition the types of and classifications of fund balances that the district holds. So again, here are the definitions, and if you turn the page over one to page 48, you'll be able to see the actual numbers and the fund balances by classification. So if we look at the top part of that table, the restricted monies, restricted by definition again means someone outside of the district has restricted the use of monies. Normally this is a grant or a federal program or state program. It could be a bond. It could be something of that nature. And so those are restricted and can only be used for those specific sources, and you can see those listed. Committed funds are those monies that are designated by you as a board to be used a certain way. And then, so you can see the 65,000 was public school technology commitment by the board, whether through budget adoption or vote. You can see that that's what's left there. And then the unassigned number, which is the remaining balance in your general fund, is really available to be used at your discretion. Those are unrestricted, unreserved, uncommitted monies available for use. We have talked, I believe, in the past about certain districts that are monitoring closely their fund balances, concerned about that, would adopt what they call a stabilization program, meaning that they could, by vote, indicate we do not want to go below a certain percentage or a certain month's worth of expenditures within our budget. And so if you decide to do that in the future, that would then take some of those unassigned monies and commit them specifically to a reserve in the general fund. Just something to consider as you budget in the future. Page 49, the last note I wanted to look at with you before we look at the non-major funds. This is the year, we've talked about this in previous years, but this is the year that GASB, and GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. This is a standard implemented by the government and applies to all school districts. And it's called GASB Statement 84. And this relates to the student activity funds. Those monies that were held at the high school, elementary schools, monies that in the past we have defined as belonging to the students, really not belonging to the district. These are monies, fees paid for programs and spent on those children. And so the government looked at that and said, okay, we understand those belong to the students. We understand that those are fees paid by the students. However, we also understand that there are principals and teachers, there are coaches and advisors who really are driving how that money is spent. And so your employees of the district really are handling and monitoring and really taking care of those monies. So by definition, they're saying they're really not agency or fiduciary funds. They are just another type of fund within the district. And so this year, for the first time, the state requires that all of those monies be pulled into the financial statements of the district instead of being shown in the back as just supplementary information. So we'll look at that. But what this footnote does is explain that as well as tell you the numbers. So if you look at the change column down in that table, that 155,760 was the amount of those activity funds at the end of last year. And what we're saying is we brought those into the district and increased the overall governmental fund balances from 104 out of the 155 to the 260. And I'll show you where that shows up in just a moment.
Scott,
Please.
I think we need to also clarify that this isn't just high school.
No, that's all funds
All
combined.
schools, all funds.
Okay.
And so when somebody's looking at this on the outside going, oh, wow, your high school has that much in here. But it's all funds combined that flows in and flows out.
That's correct. Yep.
So, excuse me, does that mean that the way they're collecting the funds has to change, or?
That's a great question. I don't know that it has to change significantly because I think your controls over those funds are already in place and functioning. However, what we talked about in our closing meeting and what we're recommending to districts is that now that these are district monies, the same controls that exist in this building over your budget and over your dollars should apply at every one of those locations, elementary schools. So if there is a authorization required before a purchase, it should happen at the buildings as well.
Office level.
And those things are in
They're
place.
already in place
That will
and
be for next year.
currently.
Oh, they are.
Like-
And it has been for years. The fact that the board reviews the school's finances every month,
Right.
that's
they've
part
been-
of this.
Right, but it has never been incorporated.
That's correct.
Yes.
before.
And now it's just also audited. So we've been doing those where we have to have dual signatures on checks, and all those different safeguards that are in place.
Yeah, so I'm always asking about that.
Now,
Patty,
what we did talk about is that I believe as an auditor that it's still your responsibility as a board
All right.
to review those expenditures periodically, whether you receive that monthly in a packet or quarterly or however you decide to do that. You should have the opportunity to ask questions about those funds. And maybe Carrie or Patty might not know the answer. So it's always nice to have your principals here because they would know, or then someone would have to return and report to the next meeting and say, we looked into that question you had. But just because we pulled them into the financial statements doesn't mean that the requirements have diminished. It actually means they've increased. And so we hope that the district will continue to monitor those and improve their controls.
Okay.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to look at with you then before we look at the letter is the other programs, the other major funds, and they start on page 65. We're going to look at 65, 6, 7, and 8, I believe. Maybe a few on 9. And the first column is what we were just talking about. These are the this is called the Student Activity Fund. The state assigned it a number. The state told us how to bring all those monies in and report them. And so you can see here that $251,000 came in through those schools during the year. $247,000 was spent. So you can see that the balance went from $155,000 at the beginning of the year to $160,000. When we audit those funds, we look to a couple of things. We want to make sure that those funds aren't increasing. We want to make sure that the students who are paying those fees are receiving the benefit from paying that fee. We did note this past year that most districts had an increase in their student activity funds. And the reason was the fees had been assessed. And then in the spring, we had some COVID shutdowns. And some of the programs that they had planned on, whether it was sports, spring sports or whatever, didn't occur. And so some of those monies were either refunded to students or remained in there for the upcoming season. So that's why you might see that increase. Hopefully your schools took that into consideration when assessing fees this year, or use those excess monies for uniforms or whatever were planned for the prior year in the current. So just wanted to show that's now where we'll see student activity funds is in this group of fund information here on 65. The other programs on 65 and 66 are basically local and state programs. And then if you turn the page to 67, 68, and a little bit there on 69, these are all federal type programs. And I wanted you to notice the increase in the federal funds and the new funds that are here. So you can see the ESSER monies. You can see the ESSER 2 monies on page 68. If you go to 69, you'll see some others. So they're just more federal monies coming through. And what that did require is that if the district expended in excess of $750,000 of federal money, the district is required to have what they call a single audit. You used to have that all the time because it used to be 250,000, then it was raised to 5, and then it went to 750. As it hit that $750,000 mark, your district fell below that. And so it wasn't required to have those additional procedures done. This year though, because of the COVID monies, you exceeded that 750. So there were additional requirements that we had to do as part of the audit. So we had to audit the school lunch program as well as the initial receipt of the COVID-19 monies that came in. And those were the ones that were required to be expended prior to the calendar year end. They had to be for normal and necessary type expenditures, and they couldn't replace existing budget. And so I think most districts were like yours. You paid those out as a stipend. You paid those out to your faculty and classified people who had to incur additional work due to COVID. And so that went out to them, not as a bonus, but just as additional payment for the extra work they had to do. And that was one of the qualifiers for that money. And what I wanted to just point out to the board is we talked about additional funds that may come to the district, especially ESSER 3. Those requirements are starting to become more and more complicated. So from just 3 in that initial program, you're starting to see that if you get this money, which is now flowing through the Department of Ed, that you have to do certain things to make sure that you're in compliance with the federal government, because the state is merely a pass-through agent. Money's going to them and they're giving it to you. So they have to ensure that you're doing things correctly. The one thing that I've noticed for most districts is if they're using it to buy equipment or things of that nature, there are requirements at the federal level to get bids if it's in excess of a certain amount. If they're doing construction projects, there is requirement to address Davis-Bacon and make sure the wages are being paid at a fair level, different than maybe what we're used to. So as you use those monies, just make sure you're monitoring the requirements on those during this year. Because when we come in next year to audit, probably one of those ESSER 3 or ESSER 2 programs will be selected, and we need to make sure that you're meeting those federal requirements. Any questions about that? Let me tell you that this letter, again, we've talked about this before. This basically allows us an opportunity to just make comments about the audit process, our responsibilities, your responsibilities. We did point out 3 different items on page 3. We've already addressed all of those in this presentation, but just a reminder that there are certain things to watch for every year. The qualification on the opinion, the issue with the budgets being exceeded in those 2 funds, and then the implementation of the GASB 84 and what effect that had on the statements. But overall, I believe the district had a very good year during a very challenging year, especially with the COVID-related issues that were faced. So if there aren't any questions, let me answer those. If not, I'll turn the time back over to Chairman for any comments or questions that she might have.
Good audit.
I'm happy how the year went, considering the COVID that we had to deal with.
And we're still facing some of those challenges. Yeah. All right. Thank
so
you.
much,
Appreciate it.
Ron.
Thank you.
Are we ready for bond resolution?
Well, no, not yet. Madam Chair, no, we're excited for that.
So excited.
Let me get this. We do need to,
We lose Christian.
no, I don't think we lost. I think Christian's still on.
I thought everyone else.
So we do need to have after that presentation, and thank you, Mr. Bond, for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So after that financial review, the board does need to vote to accept the auditor's report for the 2021. My recommendation is that we would do that, so.
All right, the floor would be open for that motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve of the financial audit for the school year 2020-2021.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now bond resolution.
Yeah, that does bring us to the bond resolution. So with this bond resolution, this is something that the board will need to approve. We've invited Christian Anderson to join us via Zoom. Christian, we're going to try to get you set up and let you share the screen. So you might be.
Mute is yours.
Mine is off, but hold on, it's not muted.
Go ahead and mute.
I'm muted now.
Okay, Christian, are you ready to go?
Yes. So you want me to try and share here?
Go ahead and share.
Okay.
So I'm muted. That should be better. It's not every day we have guests come on Zoom. So thank you, Mrs. DeGraw, for being able to get us in and out with only a few of that. At least I wasn't going.
All right. Is that looking okay then? Are you seeing that on your end?
This is second. And Christian, are you able to hear us at the board if we have questions or anything? Perfect, just making sure that our audio is working. So another thing that might help, Christian, as our board is looking up is maybe try to increase your screen as much as possible.
Is it just small or?
Yeah.
Let me see if I fix this section.
So I've got it on, full screen presentation mode. So.
This is second. And Christian, are you able to hear us at the board if we have questions or? Oh, perfect, just making sure that our audio is working. So just a second.
Okay.
I spoke way too soon this night.
Okay. Go. Okay, I think we're ready now, Christian.
Okay. Thank you. So what I would suggest is, I'll go through this presentation first, and then we do have Henry Rudolph from Skinner Fawcett on the line as well to answer any questions that you might have on the resolution. So, if you're comfortable with the resolution and want to just move ahead with the vote, that's fine. If you want to give some questions to Henry first, or for him to give you a quick summary, that's fine as well. But let me give you an update on the process overall first. There we go. So have a calendar here, just kind of some of the highlights of the process that we've gone through so far. So everything in gray has already been done, or we're at today, and then the last two items are yet to happen. So of course, just starting from the beginning, your election was at the end of August. So we moved pretty quickly from there. Submitted an application to the state for the school bond guarantee program on September 17th. So as a reminder, this is the program where the state effectively co-signs on your bonds. Now, if this were a larger bond and we were selling the bonds in the market, we would have gone to obtain a rating. With the guarantee program, you would have been able to obtain a AAA rating from the state enhancement that's on those. In this case, we're not paying Moody's or Standard & Poor's for a separate rating. We did get the guarantee, and we simply put it in the RFP that we put out that the bonds would be guaranteed, and that guarantee is rated AAA or AA1, depending on the specific program. In this case, it's the AA1. And so, bidders could take that into account, and the winning bidder here did. So we put out a request for bids on September 21st with a due date of October 7th. Since then, we received the guarantee program certificate on October 14th. That just means the state approved your application, and we have that ready to go. And then on October 16th, the protest period for your election ended. Essentially 40 days from the time the election is canvassed is the window where people are able to file suit against the district to try and invalidate the election. So typically we would not close on the bond issue before that period has ended. It ended on the 16th with no challenges that we're aware of. So here we are today to consider the bond resolution, which will formally approve the issuance of the bonds by the board. And then with that, we are on track to close on October 28th. That is the date at which the funds will be transferred to the district and will be available to spend. So with that, in terms of the bid, we received just a single bid from Bank of Commerce. Ideally, we'd have liked to see a few more. We were hoping we could see 2 or 3. Just skipping to the bottom there, we sent it to about 20 banks. We had some cite the small size, the short term, some that are really good bidders, but they said, look, you're just not in their footprint. And so, we're happy to have this bid from the Bank of Commerce. The good thing is it only takes one good bid. And in this case, you did have a good bid from Bank of Commerce. So even if we had 2 or 3 more, Bank of Commerce was a strong bid and would have been a likely winner anyway. So the rate that they proposed is 1%. As a reminder, it's a 5-year term. That is a fixed interest rate. In terms of fees, they asked for $850 to pay their attorney, and that's it. And then in terms of prepayment, they're not allowing you to prepay the bonds, but given the short term and the small size, that's really not an issue. So with that, are there any questions about the bid specifically? After this, I'll talk through what the payments look like, but does anyone have any questions about Bank of Commerce or the bid process or anything like that?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so what does that work out to in terms of annual payments? Again, it is 5 years. We align these here rather than aligning them by fiscal year. We're aligning them by tax year, just because that's how the money comes in and you'll make your payments. So with this, there's a March 15th payment that's interest only, and then a September 15th payment that is principal and interest. So that first interest payment will be March of 2022. So you can see the total for 22 between the March and September payment is about $281,000. And then in 23, it jumps up a bit to about $320,000 for the remaining years. So we deliberately constrained the size of the payment in the first year because of the school bond guarantee, not the guarantee program, the bond levy equalization subsidy program. So the bond levy equalization program is where the state just simply pays a portion of your bond payments. So we took that into account and said, okay, well, how much are the payments going to be after the subsidy? And it's, again, roughly this 281. The issue with the first year is that you cannot receive a subsidy in the same calendar year that your election occurred. The subsidy for fiscal 22 was paid out on September 1st. And so since your election passed this year, you could not receive the subsidy also this year. That being said, you will have a fiscal 22 payment, the March 22 payment. And so you are eligible for that subsidy. You will just receive it next September. So next September 1st, you'll actually receive a double subsidy. You'll receive the fiscal 22 and the 23. I've only accounted for one of those here as in terms of this net payment line. Those subsidies based on your current subsidy rate would be about $38,000 a year. We would assume that, take that first one and just put it into the bond fund reserves here to start, and then, we could apply it there at the end. But this is the amount essentially that you at a minimum need to collect after accounting for that subsidy is about this $281,000. I'll also note that your subsidy rate this year is lower than normal. For the last 5 years prior to this year, the district qualified for about a 21% subsidy. That means 21% of your average principal and interest payment. You were one of a handful of districts in Eastern Idaho that saw their subsidy rate go down pretty substantially for this most recent year. So again, you were averaging about 21%. You went down just below 15 for this year. The reason for that, the factors that go into the equalization program subsidies, one of them is the unemployment rate of the county that you're in relative to the average unemployment rate statewide. And there is a lag on when that data is used. So the most recent subsidy figures were based on the 2020 unemployment figures. And so like I mentioned, this is kind of a unique Eastern Idaho problem. You didn't lock down and shut down as much as other parts of the state did. And so your unemployment, while it did get worse in 2020, it was not as bad as other parts of the state. So that ratio of where you would typically be, what would your unemployment rate be relative to the states, got a little bit out of whack, where yours was quite a bit better relative to the state than it has been in other years. And that led to a drop in your subsidy rate. Now, I do think that's going to be temporary. If we look at the 2021 unemployment figures as of June, it puts you back up to a 21% subsidy. So I think it's just a 1-year blip. So I would expect this black line here to actually go a little bit lower in the future, but just to be conservative, we structured this based on that current rate that's just under 15%. And that's all I have. Are there any questions on any of that before turning it over to Henry?
No questions.
So nothing. It looks like you're both Shane.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear Henry now, but it looks like both of your accounts there in the room are on mute.
I'm on mute.
Okay, there you go.
There we go.
Had an internet glitch. So we were just after, we heard you until you said that you think it will be temporary for our percentage to be that low.
Yeah.
When will the subsidy?
Yeah. So just to recap that, this should be just a 1-year blip in terms of your subsidy. This happened to your other district there in the county. Madison was hit pretty hard. Quite a few saw that subsidy go down quite a bit. But again, based on 2021 unemployment figures, it should normalize back to about where it was. Now, it's always a moving target. It changes every year. So each year you receive the subsidy and then you take that into consideration when you complete your L2 for your funding. But again, I would expect that to go back up, but we've structured this conservatively just to be safe. So if there are no other questions, would you like Henry to give you an overview of the resolution or just take questions on it?
One quick question here.
Does the subsidy have to stay the same for a full year before it can change?
So the subsidy is calculated just once per year. So those are calculated every summer, and then the subsidies are paid out in September. And then the next year, it's a new subsidy based on the next year's figures.
He wants to give us an overview.
Yeah, let's do a real quick overview of the resolution and then the board will know what they're voting on.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Henry Rudolph. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Henry Rudolph with Skinner Fawcett. We're bond counsel. We're preparing all of the bond documents with the assistance of Christian. So I assume you looked it over. The resolution, it provides for authority to issue and sell the bonds. It's, as Christian said, there's an up to amount of 1.5. They're GO bonds, general obligation bonds. And the resolution provides for the date, the maturity, the designation of the bonds. It provides for the registration, authentication of the bonds, provides for the purchase, accepting the purchase proposal for the bonds, and it provides for the payments, principal and interest, which Christian just went over. It also provides for levy of taxes and other available district funds to pay for the bonds, as these are GO bonds. And then it also provides for the creation of certain funds for the bonds, the cost of issuance fund and the construction fund. I'd be happy to go over the resolution in more depth by each section, but that's kind of just an overview of the resolution itself. Would you like me to go a little more in depth by section?
Let me pull it up and just see if the board has any comments or questions on it. So Mrs. DeGraw, if I can share my screen again for everybody. All right, so I have brought up the resolution here on this side. Is that something that you're able to see as well? It is cool. So this is the resolution, and I'm not sure, you know, as board members, these are just all the legal documents that we're signing off on. And it just guarantees that the district and our bond council and our financial services are in place for that. Are there any sections that you'd like to look at specifically?
Yeah, I like I said, I'd be happy to go over each section, or if there's just specific sections you want me to go over. What I just said is just kind of a summary of the resolution, but I'd be happy to go in more depth if you'd like.
No, I think we can move on.
I think the board is, you know, aware of the process, and so at the end of this process, the board will just vote to accept this resolution. And then what's the next step after that?
The next step is actually what I'm about to do is I'm going to send out drafts of the closing documents. There's receipts. There's forms of opinions, there's certificates that the district will need to sign. And all of these documents will be signed in advance of closing. And once the documents are signed, there may be comments, but once they're signed and it's all finalized, then the bonds will be funded on the 28th.
Henry, it looks like we need signatures of the board chair and the clerk.
Yeah.
Which day do you anticipate needing those to be physically signed so they can be mailed back?
Yeah, that's a good point, Christian. What we typically do is we make the signature pages separate from the body of the document in the unlikely event that there are changes to the body of the document, so the signature pages will not be affected. We'll plan on sending out signatures to the district by Monday. Is that okay? Will that work?
So this bond resolution, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about the closing documents. The closing documents that you haven't seen yet. I'm going to send those out today. Christian, is that what you were asking about?
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure. So will the board chair be available next week to sign those documents on Monday?
Yeah. If I send them out on Monday, we'll need the board chair and the clerk. And then also, I think there's a couple places where the superintendent needs to sign. So if I send those out Monday, is that soon enough to get those signed and back to us by the 27th?
Yes, do they need to be mailed or can it be digital?
It can be digital for closing. You know, eventually we want originals in our office, but we can close with digital signatures, yes.
As soon as we have it, we'll get it signed and sent to you digitally. And then
that's fine.
A copy of it as well.
Yeah, that's fine. So as far as the process, Christian, is there anything that I left out? We did documents signed. There's documents that Zions will need to sign, that Christian will need to sign. There is a form of opinion that the district attorney will need to finalize and sign. Anything else, Christian, that I've missed?
No, I think that's it.
It's good to kind of go over the process, though. Thank you for asking.
Okay, will the floor be open for motion to approve resolution?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the bond resolution proposal.
Is there a second? Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys joining us today.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
And congratulations again on the election. It's exciting.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, I'm pretty sure.
Sure, they want to talk about our 2006 Ford truck repairs.
I'm sure I'll get right into this quickly as we are. Those last two items did take some time, but thank you for that. Was some good information for us. So we just have a bill that was over the $5,000 limit for our 2006 expenditure, and so it's one of those things that this truck is a good truck for us. If we were going to go out and buy a new truck, we can either buy a new school bus or a truck,
Right.
depending on that. So I talked with Larry, and he says that this is going to help it keep going and push a lot of snow this winter.
Yeah, so this one has the blade.
Yeah, we have two of them with blades,
Yeah,
and so
this is kind of our main truck though.
Yeah, this was a major overhaul of the truck to get it ready.
We've had to put much into it
nope.
up to this
Not
point.
much.
so
It's
this
been a
is-
good truck so far.
Yeah.
All right, the floor will be open for a motion to approve the expenditures.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the expenditures of the 2004.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that, Madam Chair.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we need to look at the November board meeting dates.
And so our regularly scheduled board meeting date was for November 18th. That will be right during the middle of the ISBA conference. Proposal to just move to the next Tuesday and finish that off and be able to allow us to attend the ISBA conference and then still have the board meeting during the month of November.
I think that would work good because then we could report on the convention the
Yes.
next week.
If the board does agree to this date, that's something that Mrs. DeGraw and I just need to make sure that we have the agenda posted by Saturday. So we'll be aware of that. So
All right, the floor will be open for that motion.
Yep. Madam Chair, I'll make that motion that we move the November meeting date to the following Tuesday after the convention.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. And the wrestling co-op agreement.
So this is our last action item for today's meeting. Superintendent Holden from Clark County emailed me with the request to have some wrestlers join a co-op with us. We did have a co-op for the last 2 years with the wrestling. It's been a positive experience. Talked with Mr. Hadley. He's supportive of that 100% as well. And so it's, right now their district is finishing up their requirements for the co-op. If the board is in favor of that, then we would be required to send our application into the 6th District Board of Controls.
Out of curiosity, how many kids have on their wrestling team?
They were thinking 6, 4 boys and 2 girls. And the girls wrestling will have their own weight brackets this year and have their own state playoffs. And so girls wrestling is growing throughout the country and even in Idaho. Last year we had 3 or 4 girl wrestlers, and
So
I wouldn't mess with them.
I have a
Ezra,
question.
come on,
I have a
Ezra.
question. Do the girls compete against themselves or do they wrestle against boys?
In both.
Both.
Can I interrupt for 1 minute? I forgot while the auditor was speaking, the volleyball team did win, so they are headed to state.
Thank you, Mrs. DeGrasse. Congratulations, girls, coaches. That's awesome. Okay, back to the wrestling co-op. Before we open to a motion, or a motion to approve the wrestling co-op agreement.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the wrestling co-op agreement.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. Okay. RFQ for general contracting.
Okay, so we are in the discussion part. Just wanted to bring everybody up to date on where we're going and moving after we've had the bond resolution and the bond money. I met with Mr. Soderquist and we would like to have a request for qualifications from a general contractor to be able to help us receive bids and utilize these projects in a timely manner, but also have some extra expertise come in and help us. And so this process, how it works is that we advertise for construction managers or general contractors to apply for this position. And so with this, the board will at the very end have to approve the person or company that we choose. And so the way that will look is we've advertised this in the Jefferson Star, also on our website. And this is similar to what we did previously when we were exploring. The only difference is this is post-bond. And last time we did this pre-bond as a way to help us kind of understand the costs. Whereas we're just doing remodel and reconstruction projects, their focus will be to come in and help us. So the timeline for that, we follow the timeline. There you go. It's going to be advertised in the next 2 weeks in the newspaper. The deadline is November 5th, that they'll turn it into here. I will be asking for a couple of board members. I believe Tyson and Lily, you helped last time with that, if you're available, to come in on November 12th, just to help with the rankings of the applicants. If we do feel like there needs to be an interview with those individuals, we can set that up afterwards. But the way that we have it worded in our RFQ, we don't have to have interviews. We can just select off of the applications.
Is it based on a flat fee or a percentage of the bond, or is it just depend on?
And so it will depend, and that's the one thing that it's usually a percentage of what they do. But other districts that I've talked to that have done this have found that they have saved more money and time, where it looks at it, if we don't have somebody else helping going out and get the bids, it falls on either myself or on our maintenance. And where we are already so low staffed on our maintenance, this is something that, Mr. Soderquist agrees with and supports.
This is sort of a full-time job.
They will be contracted to come out, check on things, and so that will be helpful. They can bring their expertise and check in on the people that have been doing the work. And so we'll see who applies. If not, we'll extend the deadline and see if nobody else applies for it. But on the November 23rd meeting, when we get back, we should be able to have somebody selected by then, and then the board will have the final approval on that going forward.
So, Mr. Williams, it's advertised in the Jefferson Star.
Yeah.
Is that just the minimum requirement? Would it need to be
It's
advertised in the Post Register too, to have a wider spectrum of
we can look into that.
possible people?
Thing that we're all is the local contractors are the ones that Nobody wants to just look at my face.
Well, you know,
My wife can't watch these anymore live. So the next two, Madam Chair, with 5.2 and 5.3, learning loss, curriculum and programs, the ARP spending, these plans we've talked about. I just wanted to bring that up as to get some ideas of how we can utilize some of our learning loss funding, and talk about some of the ideas that we've had as a district. One thing that with all of the extra additional money, we've pointed this out before, that it has to be spent a certain way within a certain time frame. We have to be careful about not overextending and going back and hiring too many people that when the money goes away, now we've created another problem for ourselves. And we're also to the point where we don't know if we're going to have our discretionary money cut again or not. And so we've been directed, or at least cautioned by the State Board of Education to hold on to it. You'll read in the newspaper and Idaho Ed News that as JFAC's meeting, they're saying, well, all these schools are holding on to their federal money, they're hoarding their federal money. We're not hoarding the federal money, we're trying to just figure out what are you gonna do with that budget? And because if our budgets are cut in certain places, and some people are gonna say, well, why are they gonna cut in a surplus? Last year was a surplus and it was cut. And we were, not forced isn't the right word, that sounds negative, but we were given the option to either meet our payments by using federal funds or going in the hole by not. So we had to use our federal funds for that. I think there are some certain ideas that we can use. One thing about the ESSER 3 and some of the other learning loss money that's come from the governor is that it has to be specifically on things. I've invited Mr. Johnson just to come and share some of the ideas that we've been looking at. We've increased and put an upgrade on our math curriculum this last year that can be used with this. Mr. Johnson, you had some ideas with ELA and language arts, specifically at the elementary level. So
Yeah, so in the elementary.
you want to come on up, at least in the front row.
Sure.
You don't have to come on camera.
Join us.
So at least in the elementary school, we were looking at the curriculum, and if you look at the date it was published, it's 16 years old. The reading curriculum is, and really, if you look at the state websites and things, you're supposed to renew that every 6 years. And so we're looking at this going, okay, what other options are there? And really, as you look into more and more curriculums, every teacher wants that ideal curriculum that has everything in it. But really, you're not finding that. There's no curriculum that has everything that we want. And so a lot of teachers, this is what they've been doing for the last 16 years, if you will. They go and they find what they like out of this, they use that, but then they're supplementing everywhere. And so one thing that we've been looking at is just what is there out there that we can supplement with. So one of the things we've been looking at is called Writing by Design, and that is currently the curriculum that Mrs. Erickson is using for her writing. They do offer it in K through 4th grade as well. So that's something that we've been looking into. The one thing we really do like about it, the one thing we really like about that program is that they come with rubrics, writing rubrics, and they are also aligned with the standards. And since we're going to a standards-based report card, and that's kind of where we're focusing on, that would help kind of lead to that as far as writing goes. Another thing, and do you mind if I pass these out or how do you?
please do.
So I went back to my son's 3rd grade teacher in Madison, and I asked if I could borrow these just to show you. So these are from National Geographic. These are just some magazines. And if you look at these magazines, there's 2 different forms. They have the Pathfinder and the Pioneer edition. And so what the students do is they get to read in these magazines. Now, if you compare the 2, they're exactly the same. They're almost exactly the same. They look exactly the same, but one is at a lower reading level than the other, so that the students can all be reading the same magazine at the same time. It looks exactly the same, but they're reading at their level, but then every single student is able to be a part of the discussion. And so when I taught this before, we would read through this and then we'd have a discussion. And one of my favorite ones was in Africa. Actually, they told a story about this boy in Africa, and he was going to school. He had to walk to school, and it kind of talked about that. But all the students could relate to that. They were like, oh yeah, we go to school, But then it dug a little bit deeper, and it talked about how his sisters in Africa have to work on the farm every day so that he could go to school. And what was so cool is in the 3rd grade classroom, we had this discussion, and I remember having a student that stood up and he was like, I'm so lucky to go to school. And so it took this literature, and really when I talked to the teachers, we have a 3rd grade teacher who actually, and I'll quote her, Emily Allen said, we need engaging stories to get them excited to read. We have the reading program, we have 95%, we're getting them excited about reading, but now we just need the text that gets them excited. Donalyn Miller talks about mirrors, windows, and sliding doors when it comes to reading. She talks about a mirror is when you can see yourself in the text. A window is when you see others or people that you know inside the text. And a sliding door is when you go into the text and the books come to life and they become a part of your reality, and it changes you for the better. And so those are the type of experiences that we really want for these students. Another, so that's just one example. Another thing that we've looked into, and I was in contact with them just yesterday, is called Ela. Ela has over 20 plus genres and 170 different publishers. They likewise have articles, but when you go and click on the articles, the teachers can adjust those to 5 different reading levels. So every student can get the same article at their level, and then have those important discussions. And so these are just some different ideas that we've been looking at. Tomorrow, I know I've sent a bunch of different links to my teachers, and I'm giving them some time to go and look into these so I can get more feedback as well on what they think of these different programs. But
yeah, and with this, as we're looking at that, we could, Mr. Johnson shared that our Houghton Mifflin curriculum is quite old. And the teachers had a chance to redo that, and they asked to stay with it because the things that they looked at,
We had money for it and everything.
but they didn't want to because the new things weren't any better. It wasn't addressing the needs that they needed.
And after talking to my teachers, I will say this, my lower grades, my kindergarten and 1st grade, they like the decodables that come with this program, and they would really like to keep those because they like it. But when you get into those older grades, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and that's really where Ela and these National Geographic magazines are more directed towards those 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades. Because in those younger grades, they're still learning how to read in the first place. But this kind of gives them.
Can you tell the board about the grant that you guys submitted for?
Okay, so through the
Idaho lottery.
You
got your VIP card.
Of course, no. So through the Idaho lottery, I did submit a grant for $10,000 to get these magazines for our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades. That grant, the grant that they allow us to submit for only goes up to $10,000. And so that's how much we asked for, which would be about half of what, but at least this would give them something. So
Yeah, it's definitely something that we just want this to be on the board's radar because we do have some spending timelines that we need to get going on, depending on which pot of federal money we use. But the conversation that I've had with Mr. Johnson, do we want to go out and try to buy an all-encompassing expensive curriculum that doesn't meet our needs? Which when you have these publishing companies, they're big, I'll say it, they're big money companies, and they're going to build a curriculum that they could sell to anybody. They're trying to fit a one size fit all. And even in our previous district where they adopted a different program, they still realized they didn't have a strong intervention program. And that's why our previous district went with 95%. That's one of the reasons why we have it going here. And so right now at West Jefferson, we do have a strong intervention and a strong phonics teaching core with that.
And sorry, with that.
Yes, go
sorry,
ahead.
I'm just gonna-
You're gonna add on to us. Yes,
Good.
we're together
So-
on this one. So-
And with that, our 95% covers a lot of our spelling, at least. The vocabulary, there is a component, and we have that, and we're hopefully rolling that out as we get further along. But really where we're lacking, at least with this, is that comprehension and the.
Which could come from these.
And the writing is the other one.
Yes, so it's something that if the grant doesn't come through, we should have flexibility if it's a priority for the board. We can make recommendations as superintendent, Mr. Johnson will make recommendations to me. We just wanted to put this out there that we're looking at it, that as we're looking to buy a curriculum, it doesn't mean that it's going to be just like what we've done in the past. We're gonna build our curriculum based on what we feel like the kids need for the standards that need to be met. And that's the approach that
In the magazine you're looking at right now, just because I love these, but this one is it talks a little bit about these kids that realized that the rainforest was falling apart. And so they adopted, if you will, part of this rainforest, and we called it the Kids Forest. And they went and took ownership of it to help make it a better place. Anyways.
So do these kids read this on their own? This isn't.
You can do it both. But
So
when
they don't realize that their book is different from this book.
And so what I've done is I've done them in groups where I had each person partner up with somebody about their same level. And then I had them all read it at the same time. And then we had a discussion about what they've read. I've also done it in smaller groups. And so this could be on a blended day if you wanted to, and even in smaller groups and rotations, if you will. It just kind of depends on how the teacher wants to set it up. So there's lots of different ways you can do that.
How many of these do you have per grade?
So I think per grade we had, in my class I had 12. So I had 6 of the lower level and 6 of the higher level. And that was enough for me to at least partner them up or do them in small groups.
I mean, how many books like this?
Oh, total, I think there was,
46 that you said.
I think we decided, they come in a really, really big set, but we would divide them up amongst the 3 grades and they would have 46. And so they have plenty to do at least one every week. So,
Yeah, 46 per grade, per classroom.
yeah.
Great, that's pretty good.
So those are just some ideas that we have with the learning loss. And are there any other questions or comments or other things that you guys would like to see us explore?
What is that news, Ella? Is it spelled just like it
It's
sounds?
NEWSELA.
News.
I think this would pique children's interest.
Yeah,
Something that's
just looking at this, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
it's colorful.
Yeah.
Colorful.
And even on the back, you can see all the different topics,
And
things I can see, boys especially.
Yeah.
Not that, it wouldn't appeal to both, but
Yeah.
it seems like boys aren't always most interested in reading at a younger age.
I'm not
And it's
even
hard to-
offended by that
It's
comment.
sometimes hard to find things that pique your interest, that keep your interest. When you see things like this, check it out.
So
So
we had one on like cheese and how cheese was made. There's all different kinds of, it's fun.
I like it.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I think the next one, bond projects, was just gonna be quickly. I don't think there's anything new, there's just that the projects are on there. I think we can wait another time on that. We can probably go to policy.
Okay.
The policy 5,000 series, these are just the drafts that we have. All the board members now have a hard copy of those.
And this is after you've gone through.
So this is after I've gone through, I put in only the policies that the board decided needed to be included. The rest have been moved into a procedure folder for our administration to look through. I cleaned them up, I've made it so that it's easier to read and understand.
We were able to
So,
go through and double check and cross with the others so far.
yes,
So it's not by any means a final, but this is where now we'll be able to read through this and get to a closer point to establish our 5,000 series.
5.6.
Question on
Oh,
policy.
go
We're
ahead.
just gonna read this at home and then approve it next time, or are we gonna have?
As long as there aren't any major changes between now and next meeting, like if you don't find any major glaring flaws, if there are grammar errors, we can fix those.
Yeah.
So if there aren't any major changes, then yes, we could approve it next month.
So 5.6, as the board is aware, I did send out some sportsmanship memos to our community. Had some good responses when it comes to people recognizing that we can do better as a community with our sportsmanship. And so some people have brought up different comments about the sportsmanship, that it's because they feel like the district's not listening to them on choices of personnel and people. It's one of the things that, I'll tell you what, I've officiated sports for 20 years, and I've seen the best and I've seen the worst of people. And sadly, it's usually the worst of people, but we've had a lot of really good support from people saying, we can do better as West Jefferson and we will do better. And that's kind of the feedback. There's always going to be certain people that will want to make a point and they'll want to do it in their way. And I'm not here, I can't control what adults choose to do. But overall, what I'm trying to get to is our activities reflect our community. When people think of West Jefferson, they'll look at it and say, well, their administration is not doing enough to help support that. And if our people are not happy with what we're doing, maybe we need to find a better way for them to be able to express those. One thing that was put out is maybe a misunderstanding about how people view their role as a patron or in a school. And I heard a comment throughout this is that parents are the employers, or the parents are the ones that, for the lack of a better word, own what we do. We're a public entity. We're a public entity that works to do things for the good of the community. And yes, it's public dollars that fund us. We're grateful for that. That's what public education is all about. But that would also mean that I could tell the police officers what they need to do because I own the police officers, that I own and so I have a different view in the board. I know this is not an action item, this is just a discussion, and I could take this a different direction. How I've always seen my role as superintendent was that, I am hired to do a job here at the district, and parents are the customers. Parents are not the employers. And so the difference between that is the parents vote you as a board in to hire me. The parents vote you guys in to guide things. But as people, if they do the trainings at the board on how it looks like, the board is not, they have one employee and it's me. And it's my job to decide the other employees. I love our mission statement, vision statement. We're a small school, big opportunities and endless possibilities. We have people that want to come to this school. We have 20% of the kids that travel to this school, probably for those types of reasons. They want opportunities. And hopefully people realize that I'm trying to establish a culture. I'm trying to establish a school system that includes academics, that includes the arts, that includes community participation, that includes athletics. It's not just one or another. And when one gets out of balance, it makes it hard for me to say, okay, I can't focus all my time on one thing. I'm trying to do all of these things to help them be good. But if parents realize that they're the customer and they're not happy with the product that I am doing as a superintendent, I guess they do have a choice. They can come after you guys to try to fire me, or they can choose to take their business other places. It's one of those things that I can't promise that we will get everything right for every person. I can't hire people that will make every single person happy in every single situation. It's just too complicated and intricate. I can't control what people say or do. And it's important to realize that because the balance isn't that of our parents being our employer, if that's the way that they look at it, that makes perfect sense why they're acting the way that some people have been acting. Because they feel like it's their right to come. One of the things at any school district event, it's to highlight and showcase students. We're here for students. And if the environment becomes negative, it reflects on our students and then our community. I can't allow somebody to come into our school and yell at a teacher and tell them they're doing it wrong. When individuals do that, they lose the opportunity to come to the building. It's happened before in the past when parents have come to school buildings and have yelled in the school, yelled at teachers. They are uninvited and are not able to be there. The same is said even at sporting events. If individuals are choosing to use that as their platform to show their discontent with an employee or a student or even an official, it just reflects so negatively on our community. And I know I wrote some procedures in the thing that went out, and some people had some fun with it about they can all walk around and throw a card in people's face. That's not what I'm just trying to have some type of way that we need to get to a spot. I don't have to use a card, and I would prefer not to use a card. But if somebody is really not representative, I need help. I need help. I can't do this by myself. And when you stand up to try to do something positive, you're gonna have some people be negative and come after you. But I hate to say this about our community. We think we're pretty good, but we're only comparing ourselves to ourselves. I've officiated for, like I said, for over 20 years. I've reffed with many people who have reffed our games. I've talked with coaches and fans of other places. And we're right up there at the top as some of the most ungrateful and ignorant people. That doesn't mean that we're all that way. That's the perception that's out there. And I can't, those are the facts of what people have said. That's their perception. Does that mean that I'm ashamed to be at West Jefferson? Absolutely not. Doesn't mean that I'm ashamed. I think we have people that outnumber those. We've just allowed individuals to use a public place to show their discontent in such a way that when people leave a gym or when people leave an athletic event and they only remember 2 or 3 people with their loud yelling, they don't know about the positive groups of people that we're trying to say, oh, good job. They don't know about all of the positive things that were going on. Because the only thing in their mind is they remember. No one remembers the score. No one remembers really who won. Some of you, I could probably quiz the board. When did we win our state championship? What year was it? 2006. Tyson knows about it because it was close. And are the kids that are on those 2000 championship, are they more special than any of these other kids? Did they win the state championship because it was? So I don't, I'm not taking anything away from it. I helped coach that team. And I can tell you right now, it wasn't only because our coaches were superior and our players were superior that we won the state championship. We had the exact same record going to the playoffs as our current football team does right now. And we had a very fortunate run. So I don't want to get off on that, but it's just, as a school board, if you guys have suggestions, if you feel like I've stepped out of bounds, if you feel like I could do something differently, you can either publicly let me know, or you can privately let me know. I don't want individuals to think that I'm just trying to run this or do this by myself, but my intent was to help our community have a positive image, but also give our students a better opportunity to have a positive experience while they participate either in extracurricular or any other events. And so that's all I want to say on that. If there's any questions, you can ask me.
I just want to thank you for your leadership and trying to get a handle on it because it's out of control. So hopefully tomorrow night is a positive experience. We can all be adults.
I'm optimistic that it will be, and I've heard from some individuals, they said we will be better. That was one of the patrons. He visited visited for a good 45 minutes. And I listen to the concerns. I'm not shutting off the concerns that they're sharing. But there's a time and a place and a process when we're in a democratic system for things to play out. Suggestions for me?
Sounds like you just want to be listened to. My suggestion is that if you've got somebody that's really out of control, visit with them, have them, invite them to come in, and just talk to them. Usually you can find some common ground. That you've already talked to some people and they're willing to turn it around. Well, maybe you just need to keep an eye on who's obnoxious and invite them in to speak. They don't make feel like they're not being listened to, so listen to them and maybe you can find some common ground.
And I'm hoping so. And I'm hoping that we can understand that listening to somebody doesn't mean that I have to jump to it. An analogy with the employer, really your customer. If we're at a restaurant and a customer doesn't like their steak, they have the choice to go and complain, or they could go right and yell right at the cook because the cook screwed it up. And that customer could go right to the manager and say, you need to fire that cook right now. And if you don't do that right now, then you don't have the best interest of your establishment in place. You could have a whole bunch of other customers that really enjoy the food and are liking the food. And so what I'm afraid of is when I listen, and I will continue to do my best with that, is that I'm hoping that if people don't see me doing what they want done immediately, that doesn't mean that they weren't listened to. And that's the part that I'm hoping to do better at communicating, that yes, I've heard you, I hear your concerns, but ultimately at the end of the day, there are a lot of things that come into it.
Absolutely, and they need to understand that.
And
maybe once they listen to your side of it too, reasonable men and women usually can come to some kind of a consensus.
Thank you for that feedback. Okay. A couple quick ones and we can be done.
All right.
So we decided for gifts for Thanksgiving and Christmas that instead of doing turkeys and hams, really difficult to get quantity of food out just with the different things. We will be just shortage. We'll do 2 different gift cards for them. And so we'll do a $25 gift card for Thanksgiving and a $25 gift card for Christmas. Be able to combine that in, then the teachers and staff will be able to use that at that location to purchase a turkey if they can find one, or
And they may want to be told about that because they may not buy a turkey thinking they're good.
yes,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Be told
Okay,
before.
we'll send a message out.
Very good point. Okay. Just a reminder, 5/8, the board of trustee election is November 2nd. And then 5/9 is our quorum notice for the ISBA conference that we will be together as a quorum. And no business will be acted on during that time.
Super. Would be open for motions to adjourn?
I'm trying to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Those in favor?